A Black Executive Perspective.
Look, man, they didn't get a chance to play chess. They had to play checkers.
Let's talk about it, T.
Openly and honestly. There was a lot of smart kids
A
there.
Black Executive Perspective.
Now, my story's not unique. There's thousands of professionals of color who have experiences like mine.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Whether you're aware of it or not, it's a topic that is often avoided.
We'll discuss race and how it plays a factor, and how we didn't even talk about this topic because we were afraid.
A Black Executive Perspective.
Are you being mindful of your mental health? So many of us are focused on our career trajectory, we often forget to take care of ourselves, let alone our mental health. Leadership roles already carry weight, and that's often placed on top of silent battles we fight in our personal lives. Join us as we speak with mental health expert Dr. Patrice Le Goy, as she shares with us the importance of mental health, how to incorporate mindfulness throughout our workday, and the benefits of seeking and accepting help.
Welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast, a safe space where we discuss all matters related to race, especially race in corporate America. Our episode today is, are you being mindful of your mental health? This is something I was definitely looking forward to discussing today. And here's why. The importance of mental health is very something that most people don't take seriously, especially in the workplace. We often forget to take care of ourselves, let alone our mental health. Therefore, especially in leadership roles, it can carry a lot of weight and stress. And then we're also dealing with a lot of silent battles in our own personal lives. So today, we have a dynamic guest who's going to talk to us about mental health. She is Dr. Patrice Le Goy, and she's going to share with us the importance of mental health, how to incorporate mindfulness throughout the workday, and the benefits of seeking help. Dr. Patrice Le Goy has a doctorate from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology with a focus on trauma. She received her master's in business administration from the California State University, Los Angeles, and her master's in marriage and family therapy from the University of Southern California. Dr. Le Goy is a licensed marriage and family therapist in California and a board member of the Community Mental Health Clinic that primarily serves low-income, BIPOC, and LGBTQ community. In addition to serving on the board, she has presented her research on colorism, which I definitely want to get into. We may not be able to do it today, but we're going to have her come back. And skin lightening at the Conference of the Middle East, and can contribute to publications in the United States and the Middle East as an expert source on mental health issues. She's also presented as a part of interprofessional team on topics including service learning during COVID-19 pandemic, and received a grant to develop a program on spiritual wellness through indigenous healing practices, which was provided to students, faculty, and staff at TCSPP. Prior to her psychology career, Dr. Le Goy worked for several years in the entertainment industry, international marketing for film and television studios. Dr. Le Goy, welcome to a Black Executive Perspective podcast. What a great background. Oh my God, this is awesome.
I've done a lot of lives, Tony. I'd definitely say that.
You know what? Matter of fact, I need to follow you so I can have multiple lives as well, right? But this is awesome. So what we want to do, we want to get to know you a little bit before we dive in, and you can help me and my audience in terms of mental health. So just tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, family.
Sure. As you mentioned, I worked in entertainment for a long time. So I'm originally from Southern California. I always knew I wanted to work in entertainment in some form, and really worked my way up, not knowing anyone, not realizing how important that can be, in corporate America, and especially in entertainment. And I found myself after working for several years in the industry, feeling kind of a little bit torn, maybe, feeling very fortunate for the career that I'd had and the experiences that I've had, and also feeling like this isn't quite my life's work. I think there's something else I'm supposed to be doing. And so I decided, several years ago to leave that environment. I had to go back to school, completely different training. My whole background was business, and decided to pursue psychology. So really, starting from the beginning with that. And I love it. I've had great opportunities working in different communities, serving people who really weren't used to seeing someone like me, or someone who looked like them in a lot of cases. And I've just found it so fulfilling. So that's kind of where I started and where I am. And I think I'm so glad you're bringing this topic up, because it is something that's kind of skipped over. You're busy, you're working, you have a lot of things to do. And mindfulness can seem like a luxury. I'll get around to that later on. I don't really have time to do that. And I feel like, having worked in corporate America and now being a therapist, a psychologist, I understand both sides of it. So I'm so glad that you're bringing this to the forefront.
Well, more importantly, I'm glad you can join us to help us bring it to the forefront. So let me ask you this. And number one, I applaud you to be able to, change careers in midstream, right? Where a lot of people feel that they're stuck and they don't recognize that, guess what? They can switch up. And yes, it's going to take some hard work, but some dedication. But to your point, you're doing something that you feel very passionate about, and you feel like you're giving back to the community, which is awesome. So let me ask you this. Is there something, an idea that experts in your field basically say that you disagree with?
Interesting. I wouldn't say that I necessarily disagree with this. I think that when we talk about things like mindfulness, like meditation, like do yoga, those kinds of things, I think that we ignore that there are a lot of people that those things are not available to them, right? And so I think a lot of times we need to talk about these with caveats. So for example, I work a lot of times with different traumatized populations. When we do meditation, I will say, you don't need to close your eyes, because maybe you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, right? And so it's not necessarily disagreeing. It's more that we need to be attuned to the needs of whoever we're working with, right? And so I think that's a step that gets missed sometimes, and it's really crucial.
Okay, totally makes sense. And then my final question, what's the hardest challenge you've had in your life thus far?
Wow. What an interesting question. I think that probably one of the hardest challenges, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners can relate, is balancing, all the different kinds of responsibilities and obligations that you have, whether it's family, whether it's work, with really acknowledging what you need to do for yourself, right? I think we can feel really guilty. I know I can feel guilty when I'm saying, okay, I'm not going to necessarily spend my time with my child here. I'm going to go back to school, even, in my 30s, and do all this stuff. And I think that it can feel very selfish. And, I think for me, that's really been something that I've worked on, is to make sure that I'm saying, like, okay, if I'm prioritizing something that's important to me, I'm also setting a good example for my child by saying, yes, be true to yourself, listen to your intuition, right? And so there's a way to do that and to balance it, but that is a struggle for me. I would say that's a daily struggle.
I would think, well, number one, thank you for sharing. I think that would be a struggle for most people, because we feel guilty, to your point,
Yes.
in terms of focusing on ourselves. And so this is a good
Mhm.
segue into, are you being mindful of your mental health? So Dr. Le Goy, are you ready to have this conversation?
I'm ready, Tony.
Okay, so let's talk about it. So one of the things, and I'm gonna use myself as an example. I'm from the baby boomer generation. And, growing up, hearing the word mental health and how people talk about mental health today is two different things. Back when I was a kid, if you heard mental health, you're thinking the person crazy, right? It's like Jack Nicholson in the movie, like, here's Johnny, all right?
Exactly.
And like, he's got some mental health issues. Where today, it's a whole total different situation. So can you just, so everybody's on the same playing field, can you define, like, what exactly is mental health?
Absolutely. And I would first like to say, Tony, I completely understand where you're coming from. I think that I will tell you, even when I decided I was going to change fields, and I told my parents, like, why? You want to listen to people's problems all day? Like, and I was like, that's not exactly what it is. But
Exactly.
it's just, if you think about generationally,
Correct.
culturally, so many things, right? There's so many beliefs that we have about what mental health is, or who seeks therapy is also a big area where there can be a lot of stigma. And so for me, I think in the way that we talk about it now, when we think about mental health, we're thinking about just being in tune with what's happening inside you. What kind of things are you responding to that are happening in your environment? And what kind of things, just transitions in life that you're making? How do you do that in a way that is peaceful, that is without judgment, and in a way that is curious? And so I think mental health, we're used to, maybe a lot of people, you think of it as like something's wrong with you. I
Correct.
think nowadays we're really trying to move that towards like, what do you need to do for yourself? How do you look after yourself in a more genuine way? And that's mental health. And of course, it covers work, it covers personal lives, it covers every area of our lives.
Got it. Got it. And so when you were saying that, being mindful of the, being in tune of the things that's going on in your head, like give me some examples of what that would be.
So I think that one example is like, if you're finding yourself that every time you go to work, you're feeling annoyed, or you're feeling sad, or just resigned to, okay, I guess this is the best it's going to be. Instead of saying, okay, it's because my job's terrible, thinking about what is happening there that is making me feel this way every time I walk in the door. And do I need to then make some big decisions around that, right? Around prioritizing myself and my well-being. Am I responding to this job? Am I responding to other things that are happening within me? So, I think an example is sometimes people stay in an environment for too long. And we've all worked with those people where they're not happy. They're not trying to make anyone else around them happy. And they just feel stuck,
Right.
And I think that when we're in tune with ourselves, when we are responding to what's happening, listening to our intuition, then we can say, okay, maybe this is something that's happening within me. Maybe this is not the right environment for me.
Right.
And I need to make a move. I need to do something different. And I think mental health and like responding and listening to what is actually happening within you and being super curious about that, is really kind of the direction that we're all hoping to move towards.
Got it. Got it. So how would you define mindfulness?
I think mindfulness is really being open to the world around you, being able to be present, being able to sit with someone and not think about what you want to say next, not thinking about what other things you need to do, but really being able to pay attention to their body language, being able to pay attention to the things that are being unsaid. When we practice going within ourselves and checking in with ourselves, we can do that with other people in a much more impactful way.
How would that differ than emotional intelligence, which is a big thing now that people, we see it a lot, that you want to be
Yes.
emotional intelligent. You want to, understand your emotions because they trigger certain things.
Yes. And I think emotional intelligence is a part of mindfulness. I think often when we think about emotional intelligence, we're thinking about directing that outward. So we're thinking about
Got it.
being emotionally intelligent to someone else's needs, to
Got it.
what they're saying, right? And I think mindfulness is much more internal. It can be some external factors as well, but I think mindfulness is more about like checking in with yourself.
Got
And I
it.
think when we think of emotional intelligence, and especially in the workplace, we're saying, okay, we're working together as a team, or we're doing a negotiation. Let me be in tune with you, the other person,
Got
right?
it,
And so
got
that's the way that I would probably distinguish it.
So mindfulness inward, emotional
Mhm.
intelligence outward.
Yes, both important.
But, and both on the Richter scale of importances. Let's pivot to this. Like I said at the beginning, I've been in corporate America, over 35 years. In a lot of places, I was the only Black person. I've been in advertising sales since 1998.
Mm.
And obviously, coming into an environment where you don't see anybody like yourself, you're the only one. You don't have any mentors that look like you. I've had mentors, but they didn't look like me. So that's a sense of pressure that you're coming into. The anxiety: are they gonna like me? Will they accept me? Will they accept my ideas? I'm different than everybody else. And then you add on the other pressures of life. I got to make money for my family. Me and my wife got to get along. I got to make sure the kids are doing this, right? And then to your point, you then start, and this, which is way down the totem pole, you start thinking about yourself, right? I really don't like this place. I really blah, 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 right? So how do you navigate all that? And the reason I ask, and you know this, in today's society, we're seeing a lot of people who, from an outwardly standpoint, seem fine. And then next thing you know, we find them killing themselves or, just losing it. And I don't think, and I love to hear your point of view, because I don't think it's just one thing. I think it's a combination of things. So I'd love to hear your point of view on that.
Yes. I think, there's so many people who can relate with all of the things that you're saying, like trying to juggle all of these different kinds of responsibilities and knowing that maybe in your certain environments, you might be looked at differently because you have the added pressure of also representing a whole group of people, whether you want to or not, right?
Very true.
So I think that is not stated enough. There's pressure to show up in a certain way. There's pressure to be positive, to be upbeat, which goes to a lot of what you're saying, where people have this public facing persona, and internally they're struggling with a lot of things, but for some reasons don't feel that they can talk to people about it, that they can say, I'm struggling, right? And it's hard to say I'm struggling when people are looking at you as like the example of the success, the example of the person who's made it, right? It's hard to say, actually, things are not really great for me, and here's what's going on. And to be really honest without someone wanting to say, but you have it so good. What do you have to complain about? Exactly. What do you have to be upset about, right? And I think that kind of goes back to that, what we're looking to do internally, that to operate without judgment, from a sense of curiosity. And when people feel that that's available to them, they can be vulnerable, right? They can say, I am very happy for my success in this area. I'm very proud of my accomplishments, and I'm struggling, right? It's that and that I think that a lot of people don't feel that there's space to say, because maybe someone won't understand. Maybe they're not comfortable sitting in that pain with you, right?
Yeah.
And so people just want you to be okay. And I think that we see a lot of people who feel that pressure, that people just want them to be okay, and they can't acknowledge that they're not doing okay right now, that they're struggling in some area. And that goes back to the reducing the stigma around mental health. You mentioned in the beginning, we're talking about mental health now in a different way. And all of that makes a difference. We're talking about mental health in different communities. We're talking about mental health in the workplace. All of this lessens stigma over time, but a lot of it comes from societal pressure, cultural pressure, whatever is going on with you, where you think there's not space for my hard feelings right here.
You're 100% right when you talk about the stigma. I always believe, I've learned a long time ago, words paint pictures. Okay. So when and again, you say mental health, the picture is insanity, right? It's not anxiety. It's not stress. It's the worst thing that you can ever think about. How can we, and then here's the other thing, and you just spoke to it, that pressure of showcasing success, but not being vulnerable to share your weakness. Because again, this being a stigma, because this is something that back in the day, you would not tell anyone that you're struggling a little bit from an anxiety standpoint. They don't want to hear that, right? And if you did tell them, instead of you having one problem, now you got two problems, all right? Because now they're judging you. Now they're saying, what you talking about, blah, 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 blah. So that makes you hold it in even further, and then you're going down the rabbit hole by yourself. So how do we get people to be less afraid to be able to share and open up? I got two daughters who 15 and 16, right? And because the world is a little bit different, we can talk about these issues. And my daughter sees a therapist because she has anxiety. Where did she get it from? Her mother and her father. All right. So
all roads lead back to that.
Right.
Sorry,
But
Tony.
there's a ton, exactly. But so there's a ton of people who are ignorant to this fact. So I'd love to hear, how can we get people to be more open? And by being open, it's not diminishing who they are as individuals, how strong they are, the whole 9 yards.
Yes. One thing I think is really important is that we can miss a lot of the warning signs that someone's not okay because they express themselves, they show up differently in different people. So, maybe this person, we look at them and say, wow, they have an anger problem. And maybe it's not about them being angry, it's about them feeling like maybe anger is the only way they can express the challenges that they're going through. That's the culturally or that within their family, that's an acceptable way versus saying like, I'm sad and I don't know what to do with it. Right. And I think so for all of us, one thing that we can do is to look at someone who is maybe not sad where they can't get out of bed or that kind of thing, the way that we might recognize something like depression, or anxious in the way that they can't function. There's other little things that can happen that really could be a sign that someone is struggling. And so I think for all of us to be more open to what those signs might look like.
Got it.
And so to not diminish those signs that maybe are not what we think is someone's losing it, someone's not well, like that big explosive thing that happens. It's not always that, and lots of times it never gets to be that, but that doesn't mean people aren't struggling. I think we just need to widen our ideas and definitions about mental health and mental wellness.
Got it. I can't remember his name. He was the DJ Twitch. Yes. Okay. Yes. So let's just, use him as an example. Everybody around him thought he was happy. Yeah. They said he was the most positive person that they ever been around. He was giving people energy. Okay. Giving them energy, chatting with them about their challenges, making them feel better about how they could overcome these things. Yes. And then the next thing you know, he takes his own life. So when you say signs, that's a situation where, and again, I'm just going by what's been reported, that, people, his own wife, who's supposed to be in tune with him, she didn't see those signs. So what is your advice? How could we, in that situation, and it may be an anomaly, but we're hearing more of that too, right? Yes. So when we talk about signs, what could we do to find out more about these signs?
Yeah. I do want to share something with you about that, Tony. I have a young child. We listen to the Calm app before bed.
Okay.
And Twitch has a calm story, a sleep story for children called Your Biggest Fan. And the whole purpose of this story is to tell children, even if you didn't have a great day, tomorrow is going to be better. There's so many people who love you. There's so many people who are rooting for you. It's really to make children feel good about themselves, right? And to make people feel good about themselves, not in a false praise, everything you do is perfect kind of way,
right?
But in like struggling is normal, and you can overcome because you have all of these things in your corner. And so I have to tell you that when I found out about Twitch after listening to the story, children like repetition, nearly every night I thought, wow, I mean, this is someone who, yes, has this persona where they're very upbeat and very positive, and also is the narrator for this story that is all about embracing who you are. And that person was struggling, right? You can see how so many people have become extremely well-versed with that mask. Once you have it, then it's really hard to let go, right? As you said, what people know about him is that he seemed really upbeat and great and like a kind soul. That's what people said about him. And for him, that then became his persona. Who wants to see their cheerleader struggling, right? And so I think for all of us, we need to say, yes, you can be a cheerleader and be a positive person. And you can also have some really dark days. You can have some dark moments. And all of it is okay. All of it is okay to share. I think that it's that pressure probably, of like, everyone, that's what you're known for. You're this person. And there's very little space for some of the gray or some of like the more difficult challenges of life to have room there.
Right.
People sometimes have a hard time holding the two things at one time, So
what I'm hearing, unfortunately, we can't just go by what we see on the exterior, right? And obviously, people are only going to open up to certain individuals. All that being said, we should be a little bit more open to ask and say, hey, I know, I get it. You're Twitch. You're the most positive person on the planet and blah, blah, blah. But let's be honest here, buddy. how are you doing? Right?
Yes.
Because we know
Yeah.
as human beings, we all carry something. So is that what you're saying, that we need to be a little bit more proactive, right? In terms of checking in and not just going by, yeah, I'm good, but giving more of a background to say, you probably are, but we're all human and
Yes.
nobody's good all the
Yes.
time.
Right. I think that's so important. I think that when we ask someone how they're doing, so many times we expect the fine. They're fine. I'm fine. And you've already moved on. Right. And
Correct.
there's not quite the space. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily come from a bad place. You want people you care about to be fine. You want them to be
Exactly.
happy.
Exactly.
Right. But sometimes we want that more than we want to hear the truth.
Right.
Right. And I think, when you talked about, your daughter and seeing a therapist, and how great that a teenager feels like she can talk to her dad and say, I need help. I'm struggling. Right. So many people are, my dad doesn't want to hear that. My parents don't want to hear that. They want me to be okay because they love me. And of course you do. You want everything to be okay. But we also have to make space for those other feelings. And I think, starting that with children when they're young, when you're, with different children and they say, I had a bad day, being able to hear they had a bad day and not running to fix it, not running to say, oh, what can I do? But just, you had a bad day. Let's hear about it. What's going on? What would you like to be different? What feels like it's within you to make a change? Do you know what I mean? Like empowering people to have those hard feelings, whether that's your kids, your coworkers, whoever. Like it's okay. We can be there and I can hear it. I'm not going to try to fix it. I'm going to let you be, but I will be available to you to hear
Exactly.
it.
Listen,
Yeah.
I mean, this great, and this is one-on-one advice. All right. I'm getting this right directly from Dr. Le Goy. So, one of my challenges has always been trying to fix stuff.
Mm.
Right. And to your point, I
Yes.
had to learn that it's okay. Just let the person, be able to say and speak. And, my question is, so what are you thinking? How
Mhm.
does that affect
Yes.
you? Right? How do you
Yes.
feel about that? Right? And it'd be amazed, my youngest daughter, she's 15. She'll be like, daddy, I don't care. They just say what they got to say. It don't bother me. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, she good. All
Mhm.
right.
Yeah.
And then my other daughter, she may not say that. She may just, it's fine. And then just
Mhm.
hearing that and the way you hear it, she ain't fine. Right.
Yes.
So
Yes.
those are the things that we have to check. And I really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing that, because at the end of the day, it's our next generation. We don't
Mhm.
want them to have that stigma that I had or your parents had and my parents had,
Yes.
and I love to hear your thoughts on this. Now you can, you got DNA and you can, say, hey, this person came from this family and this
Mhm.
person came
Mhm.
from that
Mhm.
family, right? Well, also there's a negative to that too. So if this person is a burglar, he came from that family. If he's got mental health issues, then guess
Yeah.
what? That family must have mental health issues. So
Yeah.
there was a family stigma to that. So let me hear your
Mm.
thoughts on that.
Yes, I think so. And before we get into that, I do want to say that when you were talking about how you ask your children questions, even the questions that you're asking are things for us to keep in mind. So what you said I thought was really nice, because you said, how are you feeling about that? You didn't say, are you okay with that? Which is a yes, no conversation that closes the book, right?
Correct.
It doesn't give someone a space for all of the more complicated things. So I think even whether you're realizing it or not, those are the kinds of questions, the tone that you're asking them in, that create the space what we're talking about, that reduce the stigma, that allow you to have the complicated feelings. So I just wanted to praise
Oh,
your
thank you. I
questions and your
appreciate
asking,
that. I
because
get
it's
an
so
A
important.
from Dr. Le Goy. I love it.
It's so important. And so now to your actual question about the stigma, that I think that definitely can shape people's feelings, right? And I think that if you come from a family where maybe, people weren't really doing too well, or, not always able to make the best decisions, you might go in the opposite direction. And you might be one of those people that says, I'm going to be a success at all costs. I'm never going to let anyone know if I'm struggling, because I have to prove that I'm not like them. Outwardly can look like, well, this person made it. This person's a success. That's good for them. And that person is still struggling because they're reacting to something negative. All of their success can be a reaction to it. And then, of course, on the other hand, people who feel unfairly judged because of, where they come from or who their family is, that kind of thing, they might say, well, no one thinks anything of me anyway, so I might as well live up to that. Right. And so either side of that is not really mindfulness, right? It's not really like being in tune with what's happening with yourself, it's really responding to the external, in a way that may show up on its face as being really positive or not, but it's still not genuine or
Right.
authentic to you, if that makes sense.
Right. It does make sense. It makes a lot of sense. So let me paint a picture for you. I'm working. I'm in corporate America. I'm leading a team. I have this big project that I have to accomplish, but I'm not feeling good mentally right now. What would you recommend in terms of how do I manage my workload when I have this, they're paying me to lead, they're paying me to solve problems, but at the same time, mentally, I don't feel good about me. I'm stressing. So what would you talk about? What type of solutions can somebody be able to do on the spot? Because a lot of our listeners deal with this on a daily basis.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that if you are in a position to lead, hopefully you're also creating the kind of team that allows for these kinds of nuances, so that if you're able to go to other people within your team and say, hey, this is happening with me, I might need you to take this on, rather than me leading it. But hopefully you've already created that kind of environment where you welcomed other people to be able to come to you and say, this is really what's happening, and being very honest about what's happening in their lives. And if you're a leader, you can have a lot of control over that culture of your team, right? And so I would say that I think that's so important if you are in a leadership position. Yes, it's about meeting your goals, the team's goals, the company's goals. It's also about creating an environment where you and your team can be honest and vulnerable and be able to connect in a very genuine way. So I think that's part of it. And so if that hasn't taken place, for whatever reason, you don't feel like that's a safe place, a safe environment for you to be honest about your struggles, I still think that there's steps that can be taken in our daily lives to make sure that we don't allow work to take away our mental health, right? And I think that a lot of that is being able to recognize that our workday, our responsibility starts before we walk in the office, get on the first
Correct.
Zoom call, right? How are we looking after ourselves in those in between hours? Are we getting enough sleep? What's our sleep hygiene like? Are we on emails until we fall asleep at night and on emails first thing in the morning? Or are we setting aside time for things that really matter to us that are not related to our work selves? Are we able to get outside, to exercise, to just sit in the sun a little bit, each day? What are we doing that's just for ourselves, that is not allowing work to take over every part of our well-being? Because you get so burnt out really quickly, and then you just like you said, I don't feel great, I can't take this on, I'm overwhelmed because I haven't been looking after myself. I've been focused on these other things happening for so long that I haven't checked in with myself in a while. And all of a sudden I can't do it.
Right.
I can't do it. It's too much for me. And so I really encourage people to step away from work, even when you're really busy, even when it seems like it's not available to you. And that doesn't mean you're taking an extended vacation. It just means in the morning, I'm going to spend the first 5 minutes doing something other than checking emails. I'm going to, read something that's just for fun. I'm going to sit outside. I'm going to talk to someone who I don't work with that's not about work. Whatever it is that nourishes you, just making sure that you're taking a little bit of time for yourself every day and really prioritizing yourself helps to reduce that feeling of burnout that you were talking about, where you feel like I'm not up to it. So I would say those two things.
That's awesome. That's awesome. For whatever reason, we here in the United States, because it's different if you go to Europe and other parts of the country, work is our life, where life is their work. Okay.
Yes.
And so we put work, once you graduate college, or even if you don't go to college and you get a job, that becomes your primary effort and your source in everything that you do. So what I'm hearing you're saying is that, hey, Tony, it's okay to say, hey, I need a break. It's okay to be open to your team, right? Because guess what? They may need a break. And it reminds me of a story, if you don't mind me sharing. And I'm going to, change the names to protect the innocent. But this was years ago, and I worked at a company, and our chief marketing officer, she and I had a great relationship. And one day she called me in her office and she said, Tony, She said, I got to say this to you. I need your help. She says, am I doing a great job? Am I? And I'm like, yeah, you're doing an awesome job. She said, I just feel like everybody's against me. I just feel just so much pressure. And I said, listen, you're awesome. You're doing a great job. So my point is, she felt comfortable enough to be able to share that with me. But here's the kicker. It didn't matter what title she was. So we kind of think that titles make us, we got kryptonite. I mean, we're superhuman because we are a CEO or we're a VP or we're, we own this business and we can handle anything. No, we're human beings, right? So, what I would love you talked a little bit about it, but I'd love to hear, like what are some of the things that we can do from an antidote so we're always checking on ourselves, that we're not so caught up? Because look, even though I'm on this podcast, I do the exact same thing. Okay. I get caught up in work. I'm human, right? So I would love to hear from you. I know our listeners would. Give us some of those antidotes, those things that we can do that can help us separate ourselves from work from a mental standpoint.
Yes. It makes me think of that feeling when you go on vacation and you think everything's going to collapse if I'm not there, because we work as if that's the case.
Exactly.
You go on vacation, everything's fine. The building didn't burn down. Everything's still running smoothly. And I don't know if you've had this experience, Tony. I'm curious that you're glad, of course, but then you're also kind of like, wait, am I not absolutely necessary to this environment? And you kind of have this push and pull, right? And I think that like being aware of that is that the job is asking a lot of you. We also ask a lot of the job when we make it our identity, right? And so being able to say, okay, I'm a CMO, but I'm still a human person with insecurities, with all these other things going on, being able to acknowledge that, but also nurturing the things outside of being a CMO,
right?
Making sure that you're paying attention that the things that are within you that will always be there, that are not dependent on this job or on this title, which we get really attached to your point. And I think that can be really helpful because look, jobs change, industries change, the leadership at companies change, right? And so if you are able to know, yes, I don't have that job anymore, I don't have that title anymore, but I still know who I am and I'm still really comfortable and happy with that person, that can give us like a little bit of a stronger foundation to operate on when the world around us is going, all over the place. It can, and getting chaotic. It can give us a better foundation, just being really open to nurturing the things outside of work that make us us.
I really appreciate you sharing that because at the end of the day, we have to, number one, we're a multidimensional being, right? We're not one dimensional. And so it's important. And I think to your point, it's okay to be vulnerable and say, yeah, I'm strong here, but I'm weak here. And that's all right. Yes. That's part of who I am, right? And so the more that we can have these conversations and educate and make it seem like it's the norm. And I think, and would you agree? Because I think right now it's not the norm. It's starting to get there, but I don't think it's the norm yet. What's your thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. And I think for me, I've experienced this firsthand, kind of thinking about the titles and the pressure and it not being the norm to talk about that. For me, having worked my way up in marketing and entertainment marketing and then going back to school was extremely humbling.
I can imagine.
All of a sudden, I didn't have that job where I got to travel the world and the great title. I was a student and like not a young student, like a student who like, just got married and had like a baby on the way. Like that's, that's not the way things are supposed to go. It was so humbling for me, Tony, to be able to say, okay, that part of my life is gone, but I'm moving towards something that's very important to me. And so right now in this in-between phase where I'm a student and I don't have that job anymore, that sounded really cool and, was really interesting to people. It's okay. It's okay to be there. And so that's part of my learning about not getting so attached to the titles, the accomplishments. Yes, be very proud of yourself. Know that you worked really hard and you deserve the accolades and the success. And that could all change and you still are going to be a wonderful person in the world, right? And so I think that's those, we struggle to keep them in mind, and it's really difficult sometimes to hold both of those things as true.
No question asked. Finally, I like to, how can we be a great ally when it
Mhm.
comes to mental health, to our friends, our families?
Yes.
What would you recommend?
Yes. I think that some of the things that we talked about earlier, which are, you know, being open to someone's honest response to what's happening, making sure that we're asking questions in a way that opens up the conversation and doesn't close it out or doesn't direct people. 'Cause like what we were talking about earlier, if you say to your coworker, you did great about on that job, you feel good about it, right? What are they going to say? Yeah, I feel great about it.
Yeah, I
Right?
feel good. Nah, I suck.
Right, exactly. Oh, either one of those, whether someone's saying I don't think I did a good job, or yes, I think I did a good job, it doesn't leave room for the rest of the conversation. So I think that every time we can do those kinds of things where we're opening up the conversation, when we're sharing our own vulnerabilities with people, that allows them to see you as a safe space for
I
them.
love that.
And so we can, there's so many opportunities to do this every single day with everyone that you talk to. Just being able to sit and listen and not feeling like you need to direct the conversation one way or the other, engaging, active listening, setting your own boundaries in your life. That's also like showing people, like modeling for people how they can be in the world, and how they can be authentic to themselves in the world. So I think there's so many opportunities. Think about every time you're opening up a conversation and you're leaving room for like all the gray areas for someone, and see how they respond, and I
That
think
is
that
awesome.
is something that's we can just all do in every part of our lives.
I love the part about being vulnerable to them about you, because
Mm,
then that opens up, for
yes.
them to feel like they can be vulnerable back, right? There's an old saying like,
Yes.
life is like a boomerang. Whatever you
Mm,
throw out, comes back. So I love that. I think
absolutely.
that is awesome. You know, does people of color, are they having
Mm.
more mental health issues versus anybody else? Because look, based on your background, you've been all over in Middle East. You've worked in the BIPOC area. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that, look, I can only speak as a female person of color, right?
Yep.
Like I can speak from my environment, and I can say that there are a lot of stressors every single day in the world around us that add on to whatever other issues that you might be dealing with in daily life. And so I would say, in my experience, the clients that I've seen, and personally as well, that often the people who need the help the most are the least likely to seek it or receive it, right? And so for to be a Black person in America is to deal with daily trauma, whether you, even if you're not experiencing it personally, you're experiencing it by seeing what's happening on the news, seeing all these different things that are going on. It's impossible to separate ourselves from our environments, and even the people who think that they're doing it well are not.
No.
And maybe they're fooling themselves or other people for a bit, but it's not sustainable, right? And so I think that whatever, if you're from a marginalized community in any form, you have that on top of, okay, I also have to do really well in my job because maybe I'm the only person here and I'm representing everyone. And I need to be a success because my parents worked so hard and the ancestors wanted this for me and they worked so hard for me, right? Like we feel that
Exactly.
pressure.
We're carrying
It's
400 years
real.
on our back.
Yes, 100% for us, for people who are like children of immigrants, like, or immigrants themselves. People have sacrificed their lives for you to have these opportunities. And it is, I think, a challenge to honor those and honor yourself at the same time. And I think that's a lot of what we see. And then you add to that the stigma of letting people know that you're struggling, being able to find a clinician who looks like you or can understand your background, that kind of thing. It piles on a little bit
Right.
with for people who need to talk to someone, feeling like, oh, that's not something that we do, or that's
Right.
not something that I can afford, or that's not something that's available to me, right? So I would definitely say people in marginalized communities really often need this help, in a greater form and maybe in a different way than what's currently available widespread.
I really appreciate you sharing your insights and thoughts and expertise. We're at time. I could talk to you all day long. We just we just touching the surface of this. And
Yes.
hopefully we can have you come back at some time at a later date so we can dive in deeper. Especially, I love to talk about colorism
Yeah, I'd love
because
to.
that's something I dealt with and a lot of people deal with. And I
Hmm.
think for our audience, especially our white audience, they need to hear more about that dynamic that has a
Yes.
lot to do in terms of how we see ourselves and how
Hmm.
we have our own infights within our own communities because
Yes.
of light skin, dark skin, whatever the
Yes.
case may be. So I love to
Yes.
have you back. But my
Okay.
question to you is, how can we help you? How can Black Executive
Mhm.
Perspective help you at all?
I love this question. This is so great. I think doing more of these kinds of segments, being able to say, hey, I'm Tony, you know me this way. I'm an executive. These are things that are happening within me. I'm going to have people on who are going to normalize these kinds of conversations, to change our culture, to change our beliefs around some of them, to say, like, you can be a fully functioning human being and also be struggling. Right? You can be successful. You can look like you're happy on the outside, and maybe you are happy. I'm not saying everyone's really sad on the inside. That's not true, right? It's more that we are allowing these conversations to come forward, and we're talking about it in a way that's very authentic and normalizes the conversation. I think that helps me in like what I want to do. Talking about this more and more to different audiences, that's invaluable for me.
Well, guess what? That's an easy thing for us to do because we're going to be doing this on a weekly basis. So trust
Wonderful.
me, we're going to get the word out. We're going to promote it. But more importantly, we want to thank you for, again, investing your time to participate here on a Black Executive Perspective podcast and talk about, are you mindful of your mental
Mm.
health? This has been fantastic. I've learned a lot. I'm pretty sure our audience learned a lot. So hopefully you enjoyed the episode, Are You Mindful of Your Mental Health with Dr. Patrice Le Goy. She was awesome in terms of letting us know that at the end of the day, we have to take a break. We have to sit back, and it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to say, hey, I need some help, right? Because as strong as we think we are on the outside, every human being has something that they're dealing with on the inside. So as allies, we want to make sure that we're checking in and not as much as saying, how you doing? Is everything okay? But also sharing our own vulnerabilities with our friends and family, which hopefully will allow them to share their vulnerabilities with us so we can stay ahead of the game if somebody's having a hard time from a mental health. So today's tidbit is by Jonathan Harnish. The strongest people are those who not show strength in front of the world, but those who fight and win battles that others do not know anything about. You can find a Black Executive Perspective at www.blackexecutiveperspective.com. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and you can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn at bepodcast.com. For my gracious, brilliant guest, Dr. Patrice Le Goy, I'm Tony Tidbit. We're out. Come back again so we can sit down and talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tony Tidbit, a Black Executive Perspective, and for joining in today's conversation. With every story we share, every conversation we foster, and every barrier we address, we can ignite the sparks that bring about lasting change. And this carries us one step closer to transforming the face of corporate America. If today's episode resonated with you, consider subscribing and leaving us a rating or review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Share this episode with your circle, and with your support, we can reach more people and tell more stories.